Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and necessarily destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. And we are very fortunate today to have with us yet once again Professor Marandi, who is, of course, a man on the
Everywhere.
spot and clearly the ideal person to talk to at this moment of crisis. As we're recording, we are told that President Trump has put off making any kind of decision as to attacking Iran for 2 weeks, maybe, maybe not. That's all left up in the air. And in the meantime, there's supposed to be some kind of a meeting in Geneva between the foreign ministers of the three powers, Germany, UK, France, and the foreign minister of Iran. So before we get to that, and also what the mood is in Tehran, and how you see things developing, could I just ask you about this very troubling episode that took place a few days ago when you were talking to Piers Morgan from the television station that was attacked by Israel? So everyone was a little troubled by this because, and in fact, some people thought that, you might have been hit, you might have even been killed. So if you just explain what actually happened and, what was the sequence of events, your interview with him and then the attack on the television station, just, to put people's mind at ease as to what exactly happened on that day.
Sure. Well, the most troubling aspect of it was that the Israeli regime said that they're going to strike Iranian radio and television. And they attacked the central building where Channel One News and some other radio and TV channels, I think, are also based. But it is a complex. It's a large area. I was in the Press TV building, which is outside of the complex. It's not far from IRIB, but it's still or Iranian radio and TV, National Radio and TV, but it's a part of it. So the most disturbing thing was actually that they threatened to bomb it, and then they bombed it. And you saw we had presenters. Ironically, as far as I know, three presenters in that building. All were women. One was on Channel One, and the bomb blew up behind her. One was a presenter, another woman from Radio Ava, where when it blew up, she said we're ready for martyrdom. And a third was a woman who was doing a children's program, and she sat through it the whole time. So it's troubling that Western journalists don't care at all about Iranian journalists. They don't care about Iranian women at all. These three women were heroes. They stood their ground. You would think that these Western regimes and Western media and these so-called feminists and these NGOs would celebrate them as heroes who stood their ground and who remained steadfast under fire, under threat of bombardment, but they ignored them.
Mm.
And you would think, of course, we wouldn't think, but in a different world, you would think that Western journalists from ABC, NBC, CBS, BBC, Sky News, Deutsche Welle, I don't know, France 24, the New York Times, The Guardian, they would all be outraged that the central building, sort of like BBC, central building, CNN, Fox News, central building is bombed. You would think they'd all be outraged, but they didn't care because they're Iranians, they're Gazans, they're Lebanese, they're all Amalek. For even them, they're Amalek. There's no difference between these journalists, these media outlets, and the most sinister of Zionists. There's no difference. They're all the same. They're all made of the same stuff.
Mhm.
Now,
So
I was in a different building. As I said, I was in the Press TV building, which was outside of the complex because the complex is large and it has numerous buildings. Press TV has an independent place because it has lots, because it has foreign guests and people come and go. They
It's a lot
wanted
like
more.
RT. It's a lot like RT. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Since I've been to RT many times and we've had coffee together there, yes, it's like RT. Separate, it has its own thing.
Everybody, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make clear to everyone that I know that Professor Morandi is the flavor of the moment. He's here, he's there, he's everywhere. But we've been friends for 15 years, okay?
Ah, yes. Ah,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Very, it goes. The Crosstalk is some as a show that I've been on for, yes, 15 years, and I've the first time I think I've been to a studio outside of Iran was at your studio, and we had breakfast together. I think once in at our in a cafeteria in RT. Yes, we're very old friends, and you've always been very principled.
Well, I always, I'm slow to adapt to the younger generation's lingo, but you're the OG, you're the original gangster for me. Okay. Everybody,
Well,
Professor Randy was one of my first guests when we just put our crosstalk on air. You were one of the very, very first. Okay, George, you came a little bit later, but
A little bit later, sorry. That's, yeah.
all right, your story, please.
Johnny come lately. Yeah.
yeah, I've been with George on a few times back then. We were all younger, but anyway, we had the same principles back then as we do now. Anyway, so I was in a separate building outside the complex, just like, let's say, RT, and I was waiting for the interview now with Piers Morgan, and I was supposed to be on air shortly, and then suddenly they came and told me to leave the building. They were quickly evacuating the building. They'd been told that the central building has just been hit, and they were already warned that Iranian radio and television was under threat. So they said we have to evacuate. The poor guard, a very decent young man, he came up to me and I said, and they saw me. I was in the back room. I was using my cell phone like now, and I was in the back room or backstage. I don't remember what it's called. You know better, but waiting to be in put in the studio. So his people saw me, and I told them that they're evacuating the building. It's a they're telling me to leave, and then they saw me yelling because I was yelling at the guard. Sometimes I was pleading with them because he came and sat down and said, "I'm not leaving until you come with me." And it made me feel horrible because I didn't want him to something to happen to him. So I yelled at him, I pleaded with him. Finally, he agreed to go downstairs and he said, "I'll wait downstairs till you come." So I kept telling them that, look, these people want us out of the building. And before this, I had already been told by people from security that, look, we know that you are um, known outside of Iran and you're in the media, and it's best if you get rid of your phone and you just put this aside. And I told them, look, if I do that, then I can't speak with media anymore because I only have one phone, I only have one line, and they also said WhatsApp and Instagram are being used by the Israelis to target people. So and I said, that's how people contact me. So I'll just have to live with that. So I was in the building using this cell phone. The building
Sorry to
was
interrupt.
evacuated.
You were waiting all this time for this interview with Piers Morgan. That's the reason you were in
Yes,
the building. Okay.
exactly. And then I was delayed and delayed much later than I was supposed to be on the show, even though I kept telling them that, this is, I'm under pressure from this gentleman. I don't believe at all that they wanted me to get killed or anything, but it's just, that's just that this is the situation I tolerated in order to be able to have an opportunity to defend Iran. And then Piers Morgan, I'm listening the whole time he's speaking to the Zionists, and it's a love fest, and some criticism of Israel. Well, maybe if you did it this way and you slaughtered them that way, and if you cut these children to pieces in a more decent way, then people wouldn't be so critical of you. And next time, just when you flatten them, try to do it quietly and
Yeah,
that
do
sort of
it
thing.
quietly. Do it quietly.
Yeah, do it, yeah, there are better ways of, carrying out a Holocaust. So when it was my turn, he suddenly became very aggressive, and it was clear that this was a smear job, as it always is.
It always is.
But the issue is not was not me. The issue was that he was smearing Iran, and it was clear to me because he had a sort of piece of paper in front of him with a list of stuff to say, how Iran is this and that, and he ranted for a few minutes, and it was clear that people like him are out there to pave the way for war, to
Exactly.
demonize
Exactly.
Iranians, to demonize the country, to make it dangerous, but also to whitewash the
And
Israeli
make it
regime.
okay. Make it okay to
Oh
do
yeah,
it.
absolutely. And to whitewash the Israeli regime. So until, for 21 months, the Israeli regime is carrying out a Holocaust. And then the world has turned against it. And even Morgan in the last couple of weeks wrote a couple of tweets that, were critical. He saw that, which way the wind was blowing. And then it was clear to me that he was using this war against Iran, this aggression, this unprovoked aggression and active war against Iran, as an opportunity to whitewash the Israeli regime. To say, okay, forget the Holocaust, forget all the dead children, forget the starving kids and everyone who's being shot every day, including today, by the way, people going to get aid and these Zionists enjoy themselves by gunning them down like a computer game. So what he was trying to do was that he was trying to distract attention away from Gaza and suddenly glorify Israel and say, oh, they're dealing with the nasty Iranians. And look how, and how the Western journalists in general say it, how sophisticated Mossad is and how, I'm not saying this is his narrative. I'm saying in general, what you see it in the West
Oh
now,
no,
how sophisticated.
Frederick Mertz. Israel does our dirty work for us. I couldn't
Oh,
believe
yeah.
a German chef. I mean, now what George and I have made it very clear that Mertz is in a very privileged position because he can. It seems almost by definition he cannot be the worst German chancellor in history. But after he said that, George, I think Hitler's got to run for his money. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's nothing nothing surprises me anymore. So when I say it's stunning, it's shocking, and that it's not really stunning and shocking. I'm just stressing it. Otherwise, yeah, after what we saw in Gaza, which in its own way was is not was is the worst crime in human history in its own way because it's being carried out live in front of a global audience and they simply won't stop and they're just justifying it and glory, and pretending that it's the right thing to do. But and I don't mean just these Zionists, but I mean across the West. But in any case, so for example, they say yes, the sophisticated, Mossad. They on the first day they took out the leadership. Generals and scientists. They have homes. They go home at night. If they're not owls, and they're not bats, so they go to sleep at night, and they go to their families, and their families live in apartment buildings, and apartment buildings have neighbors, and they live in they're in neighborhoods. People in my neighborhood, I mean, some people know me. If someone wants to find me, they can find my house. There's nothing secret about my house. So what these sophisticated Israelis with their fantastic intelligence and military intelligence did was they say, oh, that general is in that apartment block. Let's wipe out the apartment block. And that's what they did. They brought down one apartment block, murdered 65 people, including 20 some kids, to take out two guys, and then the Western media glorifies this. That's how it is. And kids were, thrown out of windows, just like the scenes you saw in Lebanon and in Gaza and in elsewhere. And when I went to Lebanon, you recall, I went to Lebanon as soon as the war started. I wanted to help out with media because I thought they'd need me. Well, in my own, I thought I could help. And so I went to Lebanon, and I was there when Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was martyred. And on the like the second or third day, the Western media, RT was the first to interview me as the bombing began. In the hotel that I was staying in actually, but then Western media began to approach me, and one of them was Al Jazeera, and I was on Al Jazeera, and I was supposed to speak, and right before me. There was this woman from Al Jazeera who they sent to Beirut. Of course, they sent them to a safe part of Beirut. I was like a refugee because they shut down the hotel. Someone took me in. And then she started badmouth. I kid you not. As they were bombing the apartment blocks in southern Beirut, she was bad mouthing Iran. Iran is an evil country. They violate human rights and they violate women's rights. And what does that have to anything to do with this? That's Al Jazeera. And then
Yeah.
all the other ones, the Western journalists who had come also, and they were all near one another and near the coast on Beirut. You'd hear them saying they're striking Hezbollah strongholds, they're striking Hezbollah targets, and they knew they were lying because they're fixers, they're producers, they're drivers. Many of them lived in that neighborhood. Many of them lived in those towns. Many of them had family or acquaintances. Lebanon is not a huge country. Everyone knows what's happening. So while they were bringing down apartment blocks, slaughtering people, these Western journalists were intentionally lying in order to make these crimes against humanity justifiable.
Yeah, I've often thought that
That's
Al
how it
Jazeera,
works.
I often thought that Al Jazeera properly translated into English, it means crocodile tears. Look at their coverage of Syria. Look at that. That was abominable. Oh, they cover the Palestinians in Gaza. That makes them untouchable. Well, I agree with their coverage on that, but the rest of it, it's hardly any different than a BBC or CNN. Hardly any different. Yeah, one thing that it's interesting how George and I we actually think alike on a lot of things. I wrote a word down right here, right before we started, Orientalism. And you know about a lot about America. And it's really interesting, and George, you chime in on this. It's really interesting. In my adult life, you have this identitarian project, part of the liberal project of identity and victimization and whatever narrative is prominent to challenge power, the patriarchy, the women's oppression and all that. For me, it was nauseating. That's why I left academia. But it doesn't change. I mean, we have this Orientalism on steroids right now because black people and brown people simply don't count. It's really interesting how within the neoliberal ideology, it's fixed for certain people, but it doesn't apply to anyone else. It's no different. I mean, it's just colonialism
Yeah,
all
but
dressed up.
I think, I mean,
Let
I
me
agree.
finish with,
Yeah,
let's let the press answer first,
that's
okay?
okay. Yeah,
All
go.
dressed up in this lingo, but it really nothing has changed. This is Israel is a surrogate of the West in the Arab Middle East, and now it's taking on Iran. I mean, it's very interesting. Colonialism is condemned. This is a legacy of colonialism, but that hasn't changed at all.
The only thing I would add to that before the professor answers is it's all a matter of who is demonized. You can absolutely
Oh yeah.
demonize white Europeans, and everyone hates it. And this is and you when you were talking about how to justify an attack on Iran, you just demonize it. You demonize. But they did that with the Serbs in the 1990s. You render them subhuman, and
Yeah.
once they're subhuman, then you can do anything you like to them. Yeah, but you bomb,
Yeah,
destroy.
but George, my point is the contradiction of the glorification of victimhood. It's very selective and it's instrumentalized and later weaponized. It never applies. Like that's why you know I think it's very insidious that watching this genocide live on television. It numbs you. And they want that to happen. They want you to become, it's an anesthetic to your sense of morality.
You know, they to respond to both of you, um, they turn white people into brown people when they want to demonize them.
It's
For
true.
example, and I don't know if you can put this up before you publish this, or before you
Post it.
publish this conversation, but if you go to the Wall Street Journal, there's a front page picture of President Putin a few years ago. And it says Putin goes, Russia or Putin goes back to his Asian
Yeah.
roots. And if you look it up right now, you can find it. And you see Putin dressed in like the war gear of the Mongolian, fighters, or the hordes, as they would call them. So Putin, who's a lot whiter than I am, his roots are Asian, right? So why? Because he's vicious, because he's very openly racist, the Wall Street Journal, very openly racist. But, and he's, I'm pretty sure he's more white than most of the people who work at the Wall Street Journal. And then to go to the other point is that when in the West, of course, until Trump came, they were glorifying, 1,001 genders, and all the 1,001 genders had to be protected, and men who wanted to participate in women's sports had to have the right to do so. But if if you disobeyed the empire, they would crush you. They would crush your family. They would crush your apartment block. They'd crush your neighborhood. They'd crush your city. So that 1,001 gender, let's take care of everyone and let's not have anyone's feelings hurt on the one side, and let's wipe out these Gazans. Let's wipe out these Lebanese. That's the same people who say that are also saying this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
the hypocrisy. And one other thing that I'd like to add, and that is that actually, since you were speaking about academia, so many of these scholars, I don't want to mention names because I had a lot of respect for some of them. So many of these scholars in colonial and post-colonial studies and feminism and, I don't know, Marxist theory and whatever,
Postmodernism. Postmodernism.
postmodernism and these people, they would be critical in their textbooks, but when the genocide started, where were they? Where have they been? How many of them have been arrested in London or Sydney or Paris or Harvard or you? Where are they? Where are all these intellectuals who are critiquing Eurocentrism and empire and so they've all just their resistance is just writing a few articles and getting them published and then getting tenure and then feeling good about themselves and then retiring. They're all gone. I mean, they're all quiet. You see students, you see Jewish, Christian, Muslims, Hindu students. Did you see that? You saw that. I think she was a Hindu girl at MIT give that speech. You see these kids standing up for principles, but you don't see any of these professors with all those books and articles critiquing empire and racism and and so on and injustice, and they're all hiding in their homes or they're in their classrooms pretending that nothing's happening.
It's also interesting how masterfully, I mean, I think Israel has managed, and it's always done this, to change the subject and to get everybody talking about a non-issue, which is Iran and the nuclear weapons, which Iran doesn't have and said it doesn't have. But everybody's talking about it. Why are they talking about it? Well, because Israel has repeatedly, over and over and over again, has been telling the Western public, not in the United States and Europe, that the most important issue, the most horrible, terrible thing in the Middle East is Iran. And so now no one is talking about Gaza. Everything is just in the last few days what's happened in Gaza. And of course, Israel did this during the 1990s with its obsession about Saddam Hussein. I mean, Saddam Hussein had ceased to be any kind of a problem after the first Gulf War. He was under sanctions. He didn't have anything, impoverished. He could barely survive. But there was the constant drumbeat that there can never be peace in the Middle East while Saddam Hussein survives in Baghdad. And so what we're doing now is precisely playing Israel's game, which is obsessing about a non-issue, which is Iran. So suddenly we're talking about war. I mean, everyone's talking about war. Europeans are talking about war. Trump is talking about war. War for what reason other than Israel?
Yeah, and George, the same people that were doing it in the 90s did it to the drumbeat of war with Iraq, and they're the same people. They're the same people
Thank you.
doing it
Thank you.
exactly right now.
Yeah.
Okay? Same people.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and exactly. And they wanted Iraq because remember, real men go to Tehran. So they wanted Iraq and Afghanistan, and then they wanted to go to Iran. So the real reason why they were after Iraq was to end what they knew was the resistance. And so General Soleimani, one of the great things that he did was that he started putting pressure on the Americans in Afghanistan and Iraq. And so ultimately, he forced the Americans out of both countries to a large degree. The Americans are still occupying Iraq. And by the way, today there were huge rallies in
Mhm.
Iran. I participated in the one in Tehran. These Zionists are hiding in their bunkers, but the Iranians are rallying across the country on the they've taken to the streets in defiance of Trump and Netanyahu. But in Iraq also, there are huge rallies across the country, and that will have implications. If the United States chooses to attack Iran, I think the Americans you know, should take into account that they're going to lose Iraq, and Iraq will probably cut off the flow of oil along, and of course the rest of the oil will be gone too. But the situation in Iraq is what from the footage that I've seen today is quite amazing. People are outraged. But in any case, it's yes, you're right. It's all about Israel. We all seen the clip of Wesley Clark, and he was speaking about all the wars that were supposed to take place, and it was supposed to end with Iran, and this is where we are today. The only difference is that Iran is not Iraq. Iran is not Vietnam. Iran has capabilities that the United States simply. Uh, I don't see the United States being capable of defeating Iran. War is horrific. Have no
Yeah, I mean,
doubt
but
that I'm against war.
you
But
know, it's we've talked a
yeah,
lot about what's the plan, what's the strategy, and George and I, talk quite often. Um, and regime change for us is the first thing that comes to mind. Iran's nuclear problem. I'm sorry, I don't really like talking about it because it's not really important. It's a cover for everything else, and it's really scary. That's why they talk about it. But I think forced regime change in Iran, well, that's just a unicorn pipe dream. I mean, I don't see it. Killing the supreme leader. Again, this is another narrative they want us to talk about. But what I think is what the Israelis want and the Americans want, at the very least, this is what they often do. If they can't get the exact outcome that they want, they just want destruction. They want a failed state. And that's what, we can say regime change, a strategy against Hamas, against Hezbollah. No, no, no. All of them have one thing in common: destruction of a functioning state. Okay. And then, as George knows, I say this is the roulette wheel. They'll say, well, let's see what the next opportunity is to push this person. Maybe Juan Guaido has some free time in Florida. We'll drop him in. Maybe he'll run the country for us or something like that. It seems that's what makes it so insidious because there really isn't much. This is not intellectually challenging. We have the strength. Let's see if we can destroy it. Destroying Iran will take a lot of work, a lot of effort, a long time, and then might not work at all. Okay. George was right. Iraq was so impoverished, Syria so impoverished, and they pat themselves on the back. We finally did it. Yeah, you did it on the back of millions and millions of ordinary people. So that's what I worry about is that there's no sophistication there. You said to take out two guys, let's take out the entire apartment building. That's what their strategy is for Iran.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, and then they use propaganda, not just in the West, in our region. They use Qatar and Turkey and Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, these oil and gas rich regimes, and Turkey too, to spread their propaganda when it's Syria. Everyone knows that it's a CIA project. They know that the Israelis are a part of this. Yet they try to drum up sectarianism and racism to demonize Iran and the resistance. And then when you speak to these people, or some people and intellectuals who are pro Western regime change here, but are anti Western support for the Israeli regime there, when you speak to them, you say, "Look, this is what's happening. It has nothing." They don't care. They are so embedded in the propaganda that they'll just say, "No, no, no. This is. We're going to support the Americans in undermining Syria." Well, okay, now look at what you did. You've destroyed the country. And now the Israelis have taken up more territory. Turkey has done nothing for Syria. Qatar has done nothing for Syria. They never will do anything for Syria. Their intention never was to do anything for Syria. If Turkey wanted, well, I mean, Turkey under Erdogan, Turks are very hostile towards the Zionist regime. But if Erdogan wanted to do anything for the Palestinian people, he could have just cut off trade and the transport of oil
Energy,
to
energy, yeah.
Netanyahu, energy, which is behind this whole Holocaust. He could have, ended the trade relationship and he could have ended the political relationship. When I passed through uh, an airport in Istanbul, you see flights, until recently. Now, of course, the situation is a bit different for the time being. You see flights to Tel Aviv. And then, Erdogan every now and then gives this speech and he, lip service to the Palestinian cause. And these people, you know, uh, they clap and cheer. It's ridiculous. But so the propaganda is all directed in a way in order to distract attention from the real issues and to legitimize their new projects. And now it's Iran. Yes, you're absolutely correct. The nuclear program is not the issue. Human rights or women's rights or children's rights or terrorism or global warming or whatever it is that the West would like to use against Iran, that's all nonsense. They're infinitely worse than Iran. Look at the Holocaust in Gaza. Look at the genocidal attacks. Look. They brought the Taliban to power in Afghanistan and ISIS and Al Qaeda to power in Syria. That's who they are. That's what they want. So, and of course, the Taliban today, of course, I'm no fan of theirs. They're not like the first wave Taliban, but in any case, that's who they brought to power. So they don't care about human rights. The Iranian nuclear program, you saw Tulsi Gabbard who came out and said, no, they're not developing a nuclear weapon. And then Trump said, I don't care what she says. So it's not about the nuclear program.
Larry Wilkerson, he has a very interesting take on it, and I hadn't heard it before, but I think he's probably right. Is that Trump just didn't know what Tulsi Gabbard actually said. And so that's why he completely dismissed it, which is even more of an indictment. I mean,
I'm not sure. I mean, there was an article on
who
CNN
knows?
yesterday which says Tulsi is out. I mean, she's out of favor. And the big meeting that took place where they did all that planning last Sunday, well, I guess it was not Sunday, Sunday before that, she wasn't in that meeting, which was quite extraordinary. I mean, this was a high-level meeting deciding what they were going to do about Iran, and she, the head of intelligence, oh, she was on National Guard duty that weekend and couldn't make it. I mean, can you imagine such a nonsense? Oh, she can't make this big meeting with the president because she has to do, National Guard duty that weekend. I mean, it's a
One of the things okay, I think George started out at the very start. What I found so infuriating, again, Trump will decide in 2 weeks. Well, I'm really sick and tired of this man's so-called deadlines on everything. Okay, I mean it's quite insulting. However, the 2 weeks, if we take it seriously, let's just play along with it. It seems to me that that would be just 2 weeks to reinforce Israel's defenses. That's really what the 2 weeks would be about. So you have two full barrels to fire, and because it seems to me that um, the U.S., because of following Netanyahu's game plan, 30 years running. You got to give the guy credit for that, okay? I mean, for goodness sake, he finally found an American president that will go along with it, okay? Because I don't see, meeting the European. Who cares what the Europeans say about anything anymore? I'm sorry, okay? The G7 met. Did you know that, George? Did you know that, Professor Moran? Who cares? Who cares?
The only reason why I knew was because the news came that Trump left early. Oh, really? What was it? Where was he?
But there's 2 points, two points about that, and you probably saw this article in the Guardian yesterday, in which the Americans are now expressing doubts about the efficacy of these bunker buster bombs. They're not sure that those bunker buster bombs can destroy the Fordo, facility. They can make a big impact, but it's not going to destroy it. It's so deep underground. So they're concerned about that. And now they're talking even, hey, maybe we can use tactical nukes.
Nukes.
Maybe tactical
There
nukes.
you
They
go.
they can do the job. So that's
There
one
you go.
thing. The other thing is, of course, is the problem. Israel is running out of interceptors. It's launched this attack, but it's running out of interceptors against the Iran's missile strike. So I think the Americans, at the very least, are not ready to go.
Well, of course, we have to keep in mind that Trump is devious, he's sinister, and so he could strike tonight.
Yeah,
And that, by the way, just shows how discredited the United States is. That one day he says, I'm against war. The next day when it starts, he says, I was all for it and I'm behind it and I'm the one behind,
Excellent. Yeah, excellent. It was an
it was
excellent.
excellent. But if the war is going so well and if the Israelis are winning the war, based on what we seem to be hearing from the Western media, then why do the Americans need to come in?
yeah, exactly.
Why don't the Israel? It's obvious that the Israeli regime is losing, and the Iranians have the upper hand. That's why you see all these people coming to the streets in Iran. People have rallied together. They've united in a way in which I haven't seen since the war where the Western-backed Saddam Hussein invaded the country. And Israel, on the other hand, is being hammered for the first time in its history. It's being hit day after day after day, and it can't stop Iranian
So
missiles. And the
let's give
Iranians are the,
let's give the juxtaposition. We have huge crowds in Tehran, and we have the rich and privileged in Israel getting on their yachts and going to Cyprus and Greece. Okay, that's an outflow of people. Um, is there any reverse here, in your opinion? I mean, because George brought up the article in the Guardian, and George does everything forensically. If you get to know him, he does everything forensically. That's why I like talking to him. But are we? Is this another bluff? I mean, I'm beginning to doubt my own sense of common sense.
well, it's possible, but if I was the Iranian military, I would assume that the strike is imminent. So it's possible that he's getting cold feet, and they're telling him, "Look, you fool, if you attack Iran, the Iranians are going to go after these bases. The bases are not important. It's those tiny Arab dictatorships, oil and gas rich dictatorships, which are fully in the American camp. I mean, Qatar with its Al Jazeera, it's the home base for CENTCOM. Qatar is, there it's fully in the American camp. It promotes sectarianism in line with American policy. It was Qatar that was behind the Qatar and Erdogan that were behind the sectarianism in Syria, because Syria was the weakest link in the resistance. It was Qatar's air base which facilitated the airstrikes on Yemen when the United States waged war. Qatar is no friend of the Palestinian people or the the people of this region. Qatar is a tool of the United States, but CENTCOM is in Qatar, and you have other bases in Bahrain, and you have bases in the Emirates, and you have U.S. troops now, a lot of them in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, and so when the United States strike Iran, these regimes are all complicit. And so what is Iran going to do? Sit back and do nothing about it? And then you have Iraq and the rallies that we saw in Iraq today and the position that people are taking against the United States. The United States is going to face something that they've never faced before. And that's going to lead to a global economic collapse because there will be no oil and gas coming from not just the Persian Gulf, but from the region. And so when the economy collapses, and the United States is already deeply divided, you know as well as I, you know better than I, that the Democrats, the independents, people are opposed to the war. The Republicans, they are mostly ordinary people, not these madmen in Washington, but the Democrat or Republican. But the Republicans are against it. You see now Tucker Carlson, you see Candace Owens. These are people outspoken who are raising their voices and angering Trump. And even Bannon is turning against this. This is not going to end well for Trump because when the whatever it is hits the fan and people's lives go, are wrecked and the economy collapses, well, people are going to start searching for those people who caused this situation. And I don't think, this is not the post 9/11 moment when,
Yeah, because that was an
Bush,
emergency. That was an
yeah, where
emergency.
Bush had
You saw the
90%
Twin
approval.
Towers.
Yeah.
You saw the Twin Towers come down, okay? You saw
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
attack on the Pentagon. But why is it,
And
where's the,
by the way, Judge, I keep your thought. The Iranians believe that they will be quite possibly trying to carry out a false flag attack in order to mobilize public opinion for war. Because without it, it's not going to happen. If it happens, the Trump will be in trouble immediately. So what they need is some horrific attack where the whole of the country is mobilized and looking for the enemy. And of course, the enemy, we all know who it is. So that is something that we should be very wary of.
Well,
Sorry for interrupting.
we've already had that. I mean, the claims that Iran has been trying to assassinate Trump, but it's half-hearted. No one really believes it, so they've kind of dropped that. And then I thought yesterday, with the whole hysteria, CNN was running 24 hours a day about this attack on a hospital in Israel, attack on a hospital in Israel. Then, of course, it turned out the hospital wasn't attacked. Some windows were broken because of the impact of an attack, an explosion somewhere else. So
no,
it's already
the
being
human
whipped up.
shields. Israel practices human shields, okay?
That's right.
Because it was a
Military. It
military
was a military target.
research
Yes.
institute that they targeted.
Right. So I mean, yeah, absolutely. But we're already getting kind of mini false flag attacks, just to whip up this anti-Iran fervor.
Oh yes, absolutely. You can see it all the time. And you're absolutely correct too. They were saying when Gaza was saying they're taking human shields and they're hiding among the population. Well, all the Israeli anti-missile systems are in these residential neighborhoods, and all these military institutions are embedded in the city. So why isn't CNN or Fox News complaining about that? CNN and Fox News are two sides of the same coin. They just have different ways and different tactics to justify war. Remember, when Trump first became president, he was a Russian agent, and he was, he was obedient to Putin. But as soon as he started firing those missiles at Syria, then he became the president.
Right?
Everyone was
MSNBC. Look at those
exactly,
beautiful
yeah,
missiles. Okay, those
going to
beautiful.
murder
That is
people.
just, that. But that just shows the moral rot of the West. It just shows
Absolutely,
the rot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
So what's the mood like
Yeah, I wanted to
in
get, yeah.
Tehran right now? What are people thinking?
Well, when the war began, the government, um, it it went back into sort of Corona mode where they gave permission to people to do work from home. So a lot of employees went to and began work at home, and a lot of them left Tehran. So Tehran is not very crowded right now. The streets are there's not much traffic on the streets, at least the places where I've been to. And but the mood is defiant, and the people are united, and things are quiet. They do strike, they bomb, they murder, and they bombed the hospital. You don't see that on CNN, this sinister media outlet. They bombed in Tehran the what do you call it? The Red Crescent building in Iran. They bombed the Red Crescent building in Tehran, and they killed, I think, three of them. They bombed an ambulance with three medics. They they killed lots of they've assassinated scientists, not just uh, uh, nuclear scientists. A very talented AI expert. They sought him out and killed him and his family, his entire family. But these are the monsters that we're dealing with. Remember, the Minister of Defense of the Israeli regime last week said we're going to burn Tehran. They burned Beirut and they burned Gaza, and these monsters just burn. But that's what the West likes. CNN likes the people who burn kids in these tents in Gaza. That's who they support. They support them. There's no ambiguity here. They are with the genocidal maniacs in Fox News, MSNBC,
It, it,
BBC,
it, it,
Sky News.
One of the interesting things, George and I pick up on this instantly, but when you look at officials, Western officials, particularly American, they they're intellectually lazy and morally corrupt, and they they slip into the pronoun problem, we we. They don't make a distinction between Israel and the United States. Ted Cruz did that, and Tucker Carlson picked up on we. Who's we in this? Okay, you're absolutely right because I can remember apologist for Israel. What was her? Bari Weiss. When she was on
Yeah.
someone's podcast or broadcast, and she said we were attacked on October 7th. We were attacked. We were all attacked on October 7th. That's how they do it. We're rapidly running out of time, and I want to ask a question that nobody will ever ask you except for George and myself. Why do you do this? This is exhausting for you. You go on podcast broadcasts that you know that people are going to be very hostile to you. They're going to be insulting. They smear you. I know you travel a lot. I mean, I'm sure it's exhausting. Who likes to be metaphorically spat at? Okay, why do you do this?
Because I feel I have to. I don't really have any other option, at least in for myself, because I feel that if I can at least awaken, why do you do this show together right now? Because you feel that this is
I
an
have to.
opportunity. Yeah, you have to do it. It's something you have to do. It's not as if because in the West they like to call us, what is it? We have a martyrdom complex, like we have some sort of disease. But look at Hucklebee's letter to Trump that was posted. If anything is fanatical, it's these Christian Zionists who claim that Christ supports genocide. These are the fanatics. The Zionists are the fanatics who gun down kids and shoot them in the head for pleasure and fun, or use drones to kill them for fun. These are the fanatics and the evil monsters. So it's not having a martyrdom complex. It's feeling that you have a responsibility. That if I go into that press TV building and they're leaving the building, I had three interviews. I had one with Morgan, who's really sinister,
Yes.
and one with Judge Napolitano 2 hours later. And then an hour or so after that, I'm not quite sure, maybe 2 hours, maybe an hour after that with RT. And so I had to stay. And, yes, there was a chance that the building would come down on my head. But to me, it was like, this is a chance to speak to some people, to tell them, look, this is all a lie. This is like the anthrax at the UN
Yeah.
Security Council. This is all fake. You know, so so I stayed for that interview, then I left the building and then close to the judge's interview. Uh, he's a great man and doing great work. I pleaded and I went back into the building, did that, then I left the building again. And then when the RT interview was closed, again, went to the guards and let me in just for like 15, 20 minutes. It's not that I'm seeking death or anything, but what else do you do? You people, when I went to Beirut when the war started, it's not as if I was like hoping to get killed, but I said, well, it's easy for me to get to Beirut. I don't need a visa. I know the Israelis are going to kill people, and I know that I do have some limited impact on some you know, on some communities of people. And so I went there and I did what I thought I had to do. We have to do the right thing. And it may be dangerous, it may be costly, but look at these young American kids on campus who got disciplined, who got expelled from university, Jews, Christians, Muslims. I mean, a lot of people who are standing up are making sacrifices across the world in one way or another. The people in Tehran and other cities in Iran, they went out on the streets when they knew these monsters may be able to kill them, but they felt a responsibility to show their defiance to the world, to tell the world that the West is lying that we want regime change. They're lying that the Islamic Republic is unpopular. They're lying that the Iranian nuclear program is dangerous. The Israelis are the threat to humanity. They slaughter people, they carry out a genocide, and they also have nuclear weapons, and they threaten people with those nuclear weapons. So there's nothing heroic about it. It's my responsibility. And to be very blunt, if I didn't do this, I would be very disappointed in myself.
But the problem is, of course, it's just following up on what Peter said, you almost certainly have a target on your back. I mean, if things get very nasty, we know what Israel does. I mean, we know what the United States did during the invasion of Iraq. How many journalists were killed, targeted and killed? Israel targets and kills. So, I mean, what you do is unquestionably, much braver than others. I mean, others do contribute, of course, but what you're doing is yeah, is heroic. I mean, to be
But it is heroic, and you are a hero because, well, I think I told you many, many years ago, my immediate boss, he calls you the Cheshire Cat, okay? Because you perched up there and you listen to the Piers Morgans go on and on and on about nothing, and then you come back very direct, what was that? The Sky News one don't you have an ounce of dignity or integrity, you said? I mean, that went viral. You know why? Because a lot of people, at least people that are aware or that are interested in that, they know you're right. They know you're right. They're just afraid. They're afraid to stick their head up and say something contrary. Because Western audiences, Western populations are so beaten down and live in terror of saying the wrong thing. We went from the woke stuff, now everything's anti-Semitic and all of this. It's just one campaign after another, and this is and they instrumentalize Israel for control of their societies. Okay, and George and I have long said COVID was the dry run. COVID was the dry run to see how you can control populations with high technology.
And, I know many of these journalists. I've spoken with many of them. I've communicated with them on WhatsApp, which is everyone's telling me to delete it. And ultimately, I will, but I need it for now. And Instagram, which should be deleted too. But I communicate with these people. I speak with these people. I speak with their producers. I speak with people around them. I know many of them don't believe what they see because I know it firsthand. I've spoken to some of these people in person. I've spoken to some of these people on the phone, not one time, many times. And their producers, many of them have spoken to me at length. They know. You're absolutely correct. They know what's going on. They know they're lying. But you know how they justify it for themselves? First of all, they demonize and then they try to believe their lies about Iran. They try to believe that, for example, they say the IAEA said that Iran did this, so that show. The IAEA is a Western dominated organization like all international bodies that were created at post-World War II. Of the 35 member states of the Board of Governors, 17 are European and North American. And then with Japan, Korea, and that guy with the madman in Argentina with what do you call it?
Really, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
The guy with the chainsaw,
The
yeah.
chainsaw, yeah.
Yeah, the chainsaw guy. These 20 countries voted against Iran and censured Iran. Yeah, of course they will. But it has nothing to do with technical issues. And the head of the organization is chosen by the Americans. If you go to WikiLeaks, the previous guy, Amano, the Japanese guy, he told the Americans, look, I'm with you all the way. Whatever you say, just get me in there and I'll do your bidding. This guy is the same. So but they know this. These elites, these especially on in these mainstream media channels, they know the truth. But there's too much money involved, so they have to demonize, they have to try to believe. And also they say to themselves and sometimes to others, I'm trying my best. If like I change this sentence here, or that particular guest, I don't bring him in, or this they they try to justify it to themselves by saying, well, if I wasn't here, it would be worse. And
Well,
which is all nonsense.
but there's also the element. There's also the element of that that to date or up until the Holocaust in Gaza, it's a pretty easy gig. Okay, I mean, just go along with it. Everybody,
Fantastic.
yeah. And that's why again people talk too much about Piers Morgan, but that's why he had his.
He's just one.
But I mean, he's an interesting archetype. Okay, for us
Yeah.
because after 20, 21 months of it staring you in the face. And that's not genocide. That's not genocide. Well, then what do you call it? Do you have a new word for us? For us? What is it? It's a genocide, obviously. And I resisted because I don't want to get involved in the Piers Morgan cesspool, but I almost wanted to, after your interviews. So Piers, is it going to take 20 more appearances from Professor Marandi and 20 months for you to change your opinion on Iran? Okay, because up until the genocide, getting along by going along was a pretty good gig. Okay, irrespective of your moral, fortitude. Okay, it's a winning ticket in every way. Not so much anymore. I mean, they're the diehards like Douglas. What's his name?
Murray.
Yeah, I know.
Murray. Yeah. Who knows what they
Yeah.
got on him?
Bean, right? The
You've never
bean guy.
been. Okay. George. I mean, George is well in tune with British accents, and it's a rule of thumb that Americans kind of swoon over an English accent. Well, Douglas Murray destroyed the English accent for Americans, maybe forever.
Uh,
Well, Professor Morandi, thank you so much for giving us your time. As always, really illuminating and intriguing. And we hardly need to say, please stay safe. Don't do anything reckless. I'm sure you won't, but just stay safe.
Get off of
You're
WhatsApp.
dealing with
Get
monsters here, so you got to
get
be
off of
absolutely.
WhatsApp. Get
Yep.
off of
yeah,
WhatsApp.
I encourage everyone to get off of WhatsApp and Instagram, and I'd stay away from anything American as much as possible.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you very soon. Thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you. Great pleasure, great
Bye
honor.
bye.
See you soon.
Bye bye.
Bye for now.